Burn the Box, a portal to the world of hidden truths and untapped power. A sanctuary where together we unmask the oppression hidden in the shadows far too long. Unscripted, unplanned, unrehearsed. Stay tuned for powerful conversations, thought-provoking insights as we ignite the sacred rebellion of the global majority. Let's begin this incredible journey together. Welcome to Burn the Box. Your host, Dr. Sonali Deepika.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Burn the Box. And today I'm here with a dear friend and colleague, Tony Chavira, whose bio says that he is a relational therapist, sociologist, an abolitionist, and a brother focused on radical healing through limitless compassion. I love that. And Tony and I've been so grateful to have been part of this intimate group that was part of our bigger somatic abolitionism space. So we've met pretty much every week for like 2.5 years now. Oh, it's been quite a journey. So welcome,
Yeah.
Tony.
Oh, thanks, Sonali. I appreciate it. I know this has been like a journey putting all these podcasts together, and it's been one for me too, just in terms of having the guts, not the guts, but to some degree that building up and processing enough to be seen on camera and talk through this stuff. So I really appreciate the space, and I always love talking to you. So I'm excited to be
Oh,
here and chat.
thank you. I'm so grateful that you're here. And I know I just do want to name that I've been inviting, people from our community to be in this space of uncertainty, because as I've kind of shared, and I'll share more about this, but I don't have any questions prepared. We don't have like any set agenda or any kind of I've been talking with folks from our community about how some podcasts are scripted, and like this is the opposite of that. We're just in a space and allowing the emergence, which is what that work was a lot about, of being in a
Mhm.
space together, tempering our nervous systems, our bodies, and kind of allowing
Mhm.
for that emergence of whatever wanted to be seen and witnessed in the
Yeah.
moment. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. It's hard to describe to people who haven't gone through like such an intimate process of working through like waves of what come up in our bodies
Mhm,
around
mhm,
like anti-racism and
mhm,
abolitionism
mhm,
specifically, right? How many hard waves have to show up, and then how many kind of personal decisions. Anyway, in my
mhm,
experience, it felt like personal decisions where
mhm,
I'd slam up against, like, oh gosh, like here's the point at which I either commit to caring more about people, right?
mhm.
Like if a huge part, like maybe all of this program is facing whiteness and anti-blackness, and how
Mhm,
just how they're so aligned, they're the same thing,
mhm,
you know, um,
mhm,
then any like even small nuance, like trip over a line or make a mistake, is maybe in our moment. This is my experience, right? Maybe in our moment, something that seems like, oh well, it's a quick mistake, but
yeah,
the context, the historical context, the historical trauma around that mistake is so
yeah,
profound, right?
yeah.
That some reparation has to happen
Mhm,
in this moment. And so, my own process, right, has been to recognize that, like, despite being Mexican, Chicano,
mhm,
I have to look at whiteness. You have to, and especially if
mhm,
you're going to love people and mean it,
mhm,
if you really want to show people that you love them, and
mhm,
and you or I can't express love fully unless I've really analyzed like where where these what lays in this minefield, where they are, and if I blow something up, if I trip on something
Yeah.
and cause damage, what it really looks like to love someone enough
Mhm.
to find that way to return with integrity, right? It's funny because like
Absolutely.
I know a moment ago you mentioned like what did you say? What does burn the box
Yeah,
like?
I was saying that I often start with, what's alive for you with burning boxes and, expanding out of constricted spaces.
Yeah, I feel like this program has not just the program, just sort of the way I've been moving anyway. But the program is a
Mm-hmm.
big part of it. Like actually, you and Somia in
Mm-hmm.
particular, big part of my growth here is like I feel like our society hasn't given me enough space to like it's almost like not it's trying to keep me from loving people more, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And so, and I've always been really frustrated with that. Like, wait, I'm not allowed to love this community of people, or I'm not allowed
Mm-hmm.
to love people or the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like you're kind of curved. Like, oh, you
Yeah.
want to, like, oh, sure, you can love the planet, but you still have to drive a car full of gas. It's like you're really not allowed. Or like you can love
Yeah.
black people, but oh, well, that same thing. Reparations. Oh no, that's not a thing on
Right.
the table. It's like, do you really love people if you're gonna put I mean, you're just actually not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of makes my body sick. And lately, I sort of mentioned like, what's happening very presently is I'm
Mm-hmm.
really angry. I'm really angry at like everything. I'm so angry that I'm limited in that way.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel
Mm-hmm.
really like how do I show people that's why I think it's so this is sort of like my own reflection, being in a white
Mm-hmm.
body, a white
Mm-hmm.
man's body,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can walk into a room and people are afraid and it feels
Mm-hmm.
tense, and that's the global majority, right? Like most of the world is not white bodied,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Mm-hmm.
vast everywhere else in the world you walk in and people feel something because colonization was so vicious and people with like my body type did
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
The disintegrating, the healing really involves like everyone else eventually trusting that white men in particular, want to love them. And so
Mm-hmm.
the amount of love white men have yet to show the world is quite like I mean, there's a huge space, like a huge gap, right,
Mm-hmm.
between
Mm-hmm.
like what's being shown and what needs to be in place, like to show that you love
Mm-hmm.
someone, like really
Mm-hmm.
actually love
Mm-hmm.
someone,
Mm-hmm.
and like all these rules and things that all the law, everything in place that
Mm-hmm.
keeps that love from being expressed,
Yeah.
only proves right, only proves that you don't love people. You don't love people. That's like
Mm-hmm.
how do you like how do I, for example, like in my one lifetime, prove to people that I do love. I love you, so I've said it many times. Or maybe I need to say
Oh,
it more. I love you, Sonali.
I love you, Tony. Oh, we've been through
Yeah.
so much.
I know, but how do I
Oh.
show it? Like
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
would take your body like a certain amount of time to even
Mm-hmm.
to even like come to believe that's possible. I
Mm-hmm.
could like
Mm-hmm.
love you,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I can't blame that. That like that time
Mm-hmm.
is such a blip in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of years white body men have hurt everyone on
Mm-hmm.
Earth, right? But the box is the law, literally. When I think like burn the box, I'm like burn everything that I'm like full of anger, right? So like just burn everything that
Mm-hmm.
basically doesn't show people that you love them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
and it's just so much. Ugh, I'm not surprised, when my body
Yeah.
comes into a space full of bodies of culture,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, who's that? Okay, fine,
Mm-hmm.
I'm Mexican, but it doesn't mean anything because it's right to be afraid of a white-bodied man right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
these are just loose thoughts, all kind of colliding on
No.
love, basically.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to love someone?
Yeah.
Another
Absolutely.
person.
I I so appreciate you sharing, and we've had this whole journey together. But in witnessing you and your process and my own as well, it's like what was coming up as you were sharing is that we can only love others as much as we love ourselves, right? Like that
Mm.
that internal process of that somatic abolitionism has been for me, and other things I know all of us are doing various different, this is our work, our life, our healing in different forms. But that ability to actually tune in and like take that, to, as they say, like do the work. I know that's a common thing, but do the work, but like take that time and effort to look within at what we're holding,
Mhm.
and can we love the parts that have been affected, for all of us, really, that is for all bodies that have been affected by colonization, patriarchy, of course,
Mhm.
white supremacy, like all these forms of oppression.
Yeah.
And can we tune into that, really witness that? And I'm not saying that's easy, or that it comes
Mhm.
up in waves, as we were, you're mentioning like waves and different, we sometimes don't know when it's going to come up, when that an outside trigger per se, or some experience or person, will bring that up. But then can
Mhm.
we bring that love, like really see and tune in and bring love to that part, which then allows us to be more loving, to those people we encounter,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. What's it's hard sometimes
Mhm,
in a white body, because if I were to look back at the hip, the historical, intergenerational, institutional, and personal trauma,
mhm,
like there are people that like it would be almost impossible to love. They've perpetrated so
mhm,
much, and like drama of the violence and the culpability feeling of
mhm,
what they've done
mhm,
really fires down generations. Like,
mhm,
again, like I feel it in my body. So it's like, can I be loving and compassionate and kind to myself? Like, yeah. And I can for these particular people too. I mean, and it would be for people listening, interesting or not, I don't know, that I have some like, my Spanish side, some of them go
mhm.
as far back as like Christopher Columbus
Yeah,
type of era, right? So they were the first
right.
human traffickers on Earth. To like know that and know what they did, it's basically unforgivable because it activated, it's like the domino that knocked all the other dominoes down,
Mm,
like across the world, right?
mhm,
Can I show compassion to the pain they were bringing, to
mhm.
people who were colonized,
Yeah.
dominated by their violence? Like, yeah, I mean, pain comes from somewhere, right? And they were dealing with feudalism, like perpetration by like an elite minority of cruel people
Yeah.
who want to control. But the things they did, like my own ancestors, were just aligning, like forgiving them and having compassion for them are just completely different things, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. I can have compassion again for their pain, but also know that no way forward involves making excuses. And sometimes forgiveness, in my senses, this is my own experience, right? Sometimes forgiveness is like a kind of excuse to move through or get over without processing. And so at least in my anger at the moment, like
Yeah.
absolutely don't forgive any of these
Right.
people. Like I
Right.
don't, because they
Right.
did not know how to love. They didn't know how to love. They just like instituted a system to hold love
Mhm.
back,
Mhm.
uh, and,
Mhm.
and hurt people, right?
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
even people in my own family, I mean, this in terms
Yeah.
of like my whole indigenous side,
Yeah.
we're all victims of that
Yeah.
same thing. And so the drama
Right.
of that in my history, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I don't know, like I think like a whole big message I bring across in therapy, and I also
Mhm.
try to live that, right? It's like whatever comes up, it's mostly not us, right? It's this historical trauma that just shows up in our lives this way, shows up in my life
Mhm.
a certain way. It
Mhm.
warps my perception of like how the world, like what's fair in the world or what's right,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because I actually think like if I love you, I don't want anything bad to happen to you, and just, and I
Mm-hmm.
want you to be happy and thrive. Like, it's sort of
Mm-hmm.
foundational. So why would I be okay with any violence,
Yeah.
any oppression, even micro
Yeah.
gestures? Why would it be okay with even one of them? Again, I feel like I'm showing up with all this, like, this is what anger looks like for me, but like a little bit of an anger charge this
Yeah.
session,
Yeah.
not at
Yeah.
myself, right, or at my skin, or at whatever, my complexion, my pigments, just at whiteness as an act of violence,
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
and as like a limiter, like,
Mm-hmm.
we're only allowed to even move forward, like, in terms of the future. It's almost like it's been canceled because whiteness needs things to stay in place in this violent way,
Mm-hmm.
you know
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know at the very moment what to do with all the anger of that. Maybe anger itself, there's a compassion to it, you know like,
Mm-hmm.
this is gonna sound like way off topic, but you can tell me what you think. Lately, I've been really getting connected to the emotion, like, disgust,
Yeah.
like feeling really, like, disgusted. I think it's really easy to be like, look, I don't want to feel sick, or I don't want to feel gross, or right,
Yeah.
push back on that. But you see someone homeless, who can't take care of themselves because society's, like, basically crushed them. That's disgusting, right? And I've suppressed that feeling of disgust in me. If I've done that, if I've suppressed it, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't connect to how actually terrible that is, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
or like patriarchy, like,
Mm-hmm.
when you see, like, women get, like, destroyed, and I mean, like, violently, but even in small ways, like in office spaces, this stuff you hear every day. It's disgusting. I think if we grow up with that historical trauma of, well, perpetration is everywhere, maybe we
Mm-hmm.
had that access to disgust at a really young age,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just
Mm-hmm.
really quickly overridden or forgotten or shut down. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
disgusted by this.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
in fact, it's good. That's the story
Yeah.
we're told, right? But no, I've been really trying to get connected to, like, no, that's disgusting. Child labor is disgusting. Human trafficking is disgusting, right? And disgust in my body is that signal, like, that is not for me. That is not for.
Yes.
It's not right. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
anger. I'm angry at it. It's like,
Yeah.
ugh. It's like impossible for my body to handle.
Right.
To accept. I don't know. I don't know if that brings
Mm.
up for you, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I wanted to reflect a couple of things, and then get to
mhm,
the disgust as well. You mentioned
yeah,
about forgiveness, and I just wanted to like echo that because it makes sense to me.
mhm,
And it brought up the word that also was prevalent in our space about overriding. So like forgiveness
mhm,
as an override
mhm.
of disgusting things, that have happened. Like, but
Totally.
forgiveness as an override. I was hoping a few things as you were sharing. The charge, you mentioned charge, but I was thinking that before you mentioned it, it's like, yes, there's a charge because of historical, intergenerational, and personal, pervasive forms of trauma and oppression. There's that charge that comes, like you'd mentioned, stepping into a room perhaps where it's bodies of culture, like,
Mhm,
and because of what I witness is your awareness of this all. It's like you're holding a charge that
mhm,
a lot of that is not related to anything that you did or your life, necessarily, but I'm not saying, I mean, it could be partly, but it's like there's a
could be,
charge
yeah,
that it's, that's there. And I just felt
absolutely.
the,
There
the,
is.
the need to share these things. And then the disgust. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the naming of it. Sometimes we just need to name it, and then
Mhm,
we can actually see it better for what it is, or like just hold it and not have that, whatever the rhetoric is, where it tries to numb us to it, like, oh, that's not so
mhm,
bad, or focus on your work and whatever, like making money and all this stuff, and don't look at the what lies in the world that is disgusting. That's like, oh my God, how
mhm,
did this happen? And when you mention about
yeah,
anger, I know for me and my body, this is a whole journey of like actually getting to feel anger. And, because I think, you and I have talked many times separately about this, but like, I know for myself, there's a lot of appease that I hold in my body. So I'm quick to like, just kind of not acknowledge my own anger, but then be doing something to please or to hate, somebody else as a trauma response. So it takes a while for me to like really connect to anger. I appreciate anger. I think anger is, it's so important to be able to feel anger. And I know in these last few years for me, what I came to appreciate was this experience of like sacred rage. Like this is important, and I get to be in it because it's not really necessarily, especially I'm in my body, it's not very comfortable, the anger, which is why I'm so used to like diffusing it in some way and making excuses or whatever the things, so many different things, right? But you naming disgust, and then I was also like, what came to me was like the sacred rage. Like we get to be angry.
I have a kind of question, Sonali, if you don't mind
Yeah,
me asking, because
sure.
I don't know, it's the first thing that popped to mind. It's like,
Maybe.
what might it be like, and I'm doing it right now, but what might it be like to connect to the ancestor who was allowed to feel rage, when that was okay, because like at some point it wasn't, and then it becomes that defense mechanism, right? Like I'll do everything I can to make sure I don't show my rage or appease, right? And, like you mentioned, because I do the appeasement too, but what is it like? I'm trying to feel as I'm saying that myself, to connect to an ancestor who rage was fine, actually, anger was fine, and everybody kind of knew it was all right for them, or safe to express it, had information in it, right? I think if I knew that someone back there, like for myself, if I knew that someone back there had like healthy anger and expressed it in ways where like the energy of it like cleared stuff up or put boundaries down or whatever, I think it takes like it sort of steals anger of this idea that it's wrong to feel or wrong to express. It also makes me think that like a community can hold that anger. Like right now, it feels like if I'm angry in public or I'm angry around other people, that's like unacceptable.
Right.
But there was some person in time where it wasn't just acceptable. Like probably a lot of people, if one person could do it, a lot of people could, right? So the community had space for it.
Yeah, I appreciate that invitation, and it does. Like I have a hard time, but that's just me, of like sometimes connecting to ancestors. I think at some point, I've talked about that too. But like if it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't come as easily, but I can imagine it. I kind of can imagine it, and I can imagine that permission to express anger, a time when there was permission to express anger, and that how anger is a healthy emotion and experience, and how anger helps us to set boundaries. Anger helps us to be discerning of who we let in and who we like keep out, and then as you were talking, there was something also coming up, because as you know, like here I'm living in Mexico, and this fire, like a fire ceremony, like that sacredness of just with like in its elemental form as something that's vital. Like we need fire, but the fire element we need in our body to digest food, we need it in our body. Like this comes now, I'm jumping to Ayurveda, which is also something I've learned some about, but like that in Ayurveda, I found it very interesting to learn about what they called Agni. I'm not like an expert. I studied a bit, but I'll just share what I do know, that Agni is what's considered digestive fire. So it's not, it is for our food, it is for whatever we put into our body, but it is also for thoughts, emotions, experiences. Like we need to have a healthy fire element, this digestive fire, so that we can process, and just to conceptualize it like that has helped me over these last 10
I
years
love
that
that.
I've, you know.
Yeah, oh, I love that. Immediately, my mind went to, and actually
Yeah.
my gut did too, to like the idea of like being in ceremony and purging, like, or even just any way, like people get stressed out and they vomit, or, it's like,
Yes.
you're not,
Yes.
that's not right. Like
Yes.
you're disgusted and you got to purge
Yes.
it out because it
Yep.
actually isn't right. That's not that
Right.
fire, like how did you call it again? I apologize. The healthy
Like
fire.
the digestifier or
Digestifier. Yeah, there we
yeah,
go. The digestive
yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
It's like that doesn't feed that like digestive
No. No,
fire,
it needs to
that gives
come
you
out.
energy,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. It's like if anything, it's poisoning it or messing it up, or
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to be purged, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
also like when people do ceremonies and they vomit, they're like so afraid to vomit,
I know.
but
Yeah.
it's just you just feel like God, I can just like let stuff go, by and purging can look like different things, crying or sighing or all sorts of stuff, right? Where you just
Right.
feel that release. But I
Right.
feel like there's something about disgust, like this is not right. What happened to me
Mm-hmm.
wasn't right, or the way that
Mm-hmm.
like perpetration played out in your history wasn't right. And so like
Mm-hmm.
it needs to, that disgust connecting to it, it's like
Yeah.
this isn't the fire I
Yeah.
need,
Yeah.
and maybe haven't, you're just swallowing what isn't right for you for a long
Yeah.
time, right? Like thoughts, like you said, like thoughts and feelings and behaviors like
Mm-hmm.
imposed and forced down
Mm-hmm.
your throat actually is the phrase that comes
Yes.
to mind, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, so true. And it's like, as you talk about this purging, it does bring in what we were talking about with disgust, and that
Hmm.
the body knows, like, and it's met in the wisdom, and it's like nervous system, and it's, in the depth, what doesn't belong and what
Hmm.
needs to, it needs to come out. So like what you had mentioned about things that we witness that we can name as like disgust, like it is important because we don't, like, there is a, I'm not using getting the right words, but like there is like this rhetoric or this conditioning to just take it, just swallow it, just,
Hmm.
and and it makes us sick. That will make us sick,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
just take those things
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Sort of reminds me of previous conversations where we're just like, we rerouted our lives, you and I, in different ways, right? It's like you absorb, like digest. No, you didn't digest. You ate. The whole life was forced down your throat, and you had to purge the whole life up. You know,
I
it's like God, there's so much to blast out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
When you have to swallow so much. You know,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
hard to go back and take, you know, into families or workplaces or whatever that fed
Mm-hmm.
you that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because even a little bit is like too much. Like, ugh, I don't want to eat that anymore, or I just can't do that anymore. But by then you're connected to that disgust, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I really do appreciate that, in the work we've done, in somatic abolitionism and this time together, and likely in so many other ways, right? Leading up to this and ongoing, getting more, like what's coming is like sensitive, and also getting more
Mm,
clarity around this whole
mhm,
process so that we can name it and we can be like, oh, because I know I was in a whole career doing all kinds of things. And at a certain point, without me even being fully aware of what was happening, there was some message of enough, like
mm,
this is enough. We can't
mhm,
can't do this anymore. And so then it was like, an adventure, of course. So that's ongoing of where that takes you, but ability to really discern, like, yeah, enough. Like I can't
mm,
keep, because otherwise we can make ourselves sick. I mean, we know like the
mhm,
body holds so much of our process, and we will get sick. Getting sick, and how did that look? Symptoms like mental, emotional, physical, of course, spiritual. It's kind of like a bit of a warning, or just we have to face it.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. One of the I like something that came to me like a really long time ago, sort of like an
Mhm.
inner voice was
Yeah.
this really sort of intense, it's going to sound silly when I say it, but it's very intense for me when it comes up. If I were to write it down, it's just like the words okay with a period. And it looks like this when I say it out loud. Like, ugh, I have to take care of this and I have to take care of that. I'm so burnt out. Like, what do I do? And then sort of with equanimity, but also like, okay, you know, like will come up. And that okay is like it's sort of like okay, you're buying into this. You know, you're committing to this yourself, you know? It's like, "Ugh, I don't wanna do this anymore. Why am I doing it?" It's like, "Okay, well," you know, it's like, well, I feel like I'm slamming up against you know, "Oh, I have to do this or else," all this stuff. Okay, if that's the drama you wanna kind of take part in, like, have a great time with that, or if I'm fighting or I'm against the system and it can't
Yeah.
change just because
Yeah.
one person, I need to work in a community. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
you can keep trying to do this on your own, or
Mhm.
you can keep whatever,
Mhm.
like have a great
Mhm.
time with that,
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
don't like that internal voice,
Yeah.
that gives me permission actually. It gives me permission to go along with all the control I'm trying to express in the world. Also expressions of whiteness. Oh, like, I don't want to care about this. Okay. It's like, ah, all right, well, I'm not committing to love. And that makes it pretty, that makes it pretty clear. Like, these are choices you're making, you
Yeah.
know? I think also being in a
Mhm.
white body gives you so many choices. You can choose to love or not
Mhm.
love. If you're in a community that's defending itself and needs cohesion,
Mhm.
um, you kind of like have to love each other. I don't
Mhm.
mean it in a have to, but like staying connected means finding ways to continually love one another, even if
Mhm.
it's hard,
Yeah.
even if it's very hard. But I feel like being in a white body, you're allowed to tap out, and society
Mhm.
gives you a lot of space to do that. Like, oh well, you don't have to care
Mhm.
about these people, and if it feels even slightly uncomfortable, some people don't. They're like, well, fine, every man for
Mhm.
themselves, that sort of
Yeah.
feeling, and that's seen as heroic, or it's seen as bold, that decision,
Mhm.
when in fact it's just an
Mhm.
expression of not caring about other people, right? And so when I
Mhm.
hear that, I always
Mhm.
just, like, in my own senses, I hear like, okay, you made that choice, like you have chosen not to care then. And
Mhm.
I've said that to people in spaces, like I've said that to police in front of them, or I've been in places where I think my white male body is able
Mhm.
to say a thing like that. And it's not meant to
Mhm.
agitate. It's just meant to be like,
Mhm.
this is fine. Okay, you feel like you need to arrest all these people on a whim or based on suspicion. You think your intuition's aligned like that. You think that you're
Mhm.
someone who can be safe in society, that you get to control it. Okay, like have fun thinking that you have that right, like you're choosing to do that. You're
Mhm.
choosing not to care. You're choosing not to care about
Mhm.
people, you know
Mhm.
or I think about a lot of what we call like capitalists, people who just
Yeah.
like exploit tons of people, tons of others, you
Yeah.
know and it's like you're choosing to do that. Oh, this is just the way the system's designed. Yeah, and you chose to do it. So
Yeah.
like, okay, like just own it. Own it more, you know
Mhm. Mhm.
and I mean, like, I think when you have that much power, owning it
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
easy. Actually, when you have that much power, it feels so good. Which is
Yeah.
actually why I mean, this is my uh, philosophy toward therapy. So you can
Yeah.
take it as you want or not, I guess, or
Yeah.
toward healing. If I'm not helping people see, or not that if I'm not, this sounds so like I'm cornering myself. It's more like everyone is coping with the damage of billionaire white colonial patriarchy, right? Like all the time. And I mean, when I say everybody, I mean like 99.9%, 99.9% of people, right? If we can all heal with that awareness, like we're healing knowing like, okay, these are the perpetrators. They're not very many, right?
Mhm.
Then we can really resize the mythological way we see these people. There are actually not a lot of white people on Earth. Like
Mhm.
numbers wise, just sheer numbers. So there's a lot of outsized power, but it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to not feel the historical impact of that violence.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's like therapy, to my mind,
Yeah.
and I would hope other people view it this way too. Is like just coming into some sense of like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. You know, um,
Mm.
yeah, individually, but like eventually leaning into communities. Like, we don't have to do this anymore. This billionaire jerk is one person. I don't know. They have as many atoms in their body as I do in mine. And I just don't have
Yeah.
to do their thing anymore,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that that feels like shocking to a lot of people. It's also scary, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. This is just like old feeling intuition in my own genetics. Like the
Mm-hmm.
reason my family went along, like both my indigenous side and my white body side went along with all this colonization for so long is it's all fear responses, like
Yeah.
fi- trying to fight it and it's not going anywhere because that fight's just like pain, you know, or freeze. So you just go along with it. A
Yeah.
flight, you try to get away from it, or you fly away from your own thoughts. Or fawning, like, oh, this is the right way, you know. I can't even tell you how many family members who have just aligned with whiteness completely because it's like, oh, that's the right way to live in society, or
Yeah.
the way you get this done, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I can see that they're all, you know, fear responses. But
Mm-hmm.
if we can just
Mm-hmm.
if we could just process that fear, like
Mm-hmm.
colonial fear,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's like what else is there? You know, how much more
Mm-hmm.
space is there when we're really looking at and addressing and healing through that fear, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
on the other end, it's like your life to some degree, Sonali. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. You know, I'll just
I know.
see you later, America. You know, it's not worth it. Not to say that there aren't like there are colonial impacts on every corner of Earth at this point,
Absolutely.
um,
Mm-hmm.
especially in terms of like being impacted by global warming. There's nowhere
Mm-hmm.
to run anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I hear people say like, "What's the point of therapy?" I think they haven't yet learned themselves or seen or sat with somebody,
Yeah.
right? Who's like, the point is that you're part of this. You know, you're white, you're poor, you're part of this. You know, you're part of
Yeah.
the group of people who just haven't yet noticed, I guess, or healed to the point where it's like, you don't have to do this anymore. Like, you can love
Mm-hmm.
people actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a decision, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's
Mm.
kind of where I'm coming at this with personally.
Yeah.
Also, being in like a biracial, bicultural relationship, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I need to constantly be aware that I could do something that I don't even know what it is, and just it expresses I don't love you, you know, in a
Mm-hmm.
historical way, like to her
Mm-hmm.
ancestors, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Mm-hmm.
done long meditations on this, but it's like I feel both of our ancestors, like her being black bodied and mine being white bodied, and this whole
Yeah.
colonial history I mentioned that my family
Yeah.
have. It's like everyone's wondering when I'm going to hurt her. Lots of generations up, everyone on both sides. It's like they're like tense and scared and worried, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're sort of in their own dramas about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so like half of this is becoming more aware. This is like the non-pathological part, right? Like half of
Mm-hmm.
this is like, okay, what does whiteness do? How does that operate?
Yeah.
But also just knowing that like I can just be a white person, you know, who is always our white bodied person, right? Who's untangling whiteness,
Yeah.
and then every moment where I'm not showing love,
Mm-hmm.
just decide, like work, like
Mm-hmm.
decide, do that thing. You know what I mean? That
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
recommits to loving this person.
Yeah.
Each one of there are moments of like, ah, I'm culpable. There are moments I think are I'm sensitive to, and she's like, it's fine, but I feel in my body like just again the drama of ancestry, like,
Yeah.
oh no, like this is coming from another. Maybe it didn't land on you as anything, but in my body, I know this is coming from an
Yeah.
old place, and so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to like step aside. I felt a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
in our triad too, you know,
Mm-hmm.
with you and with Somia. It's
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
maybe at the end, you both were like, "Ah, it's nothing," but I'm like, "Oh no, I don't know what that is," but it wasn't coming from the clearest place, which is also
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
needed to leave. We have two cohorts for people who weren't listening, but one
Mm-hmm.
cohort that's a body of culture and one cohort that's white bodied. And I needed to
Mm-hmm.
leave, opt
Yes.
out of the body of culture and move into the white body one because there's just so much like awareness I didn't have. I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you, like the number one thing I saw, and everyone talks about, which I'm so glad we do, is numbness. You
Mm.
know, it's so easy to be totally numb to the
Yeah.
way that you're not showing up with love, and then when you're called out on it, or you have to make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like that numbness is the quick override. Like, well, it's fine, or
Mm.
it's okay, or why is everyone making a big deal out of it? Stuff like
Yeah.
you know what the behavioral responses are,
Yeah.
right? But in the body, it's just like you go numb. and it has all these textures,
Yes.
numbness. Again, they're rightly learned historical responses, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's what is that? That would be like flight or freeze, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They still need to be healed historically,
Yeah.
right? But they
Mm.
get to numb out in the face of perpetrating pain on a non-white
Yeah.
body, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just
Mm.
sad. That's just tragic.
Mm-hmm.
That's disgusting, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing, and there were so many things coming up in what you shared with about therapy. And like, I
Mm,
just want to name that when you were talking about that, I did have this kind of image, or this idea of like laying down one's armor so that you can
mhm,
actually start to explore what's really there, like that we've created all this, protection around. Yeah, very much remember when you made that choice, like a very, very conscious choice of like, I need to step into this other group, I need to explore, because you were holding both, experiences. I remember feeling a little sad, because I
mm.
like wanted you in our group still. I mean, we were
No, I
still
get it.
meeting. We were still meeting, of course. But it's
Mhm,
like, okay, I get it, and what I witnessed is for you, it opened up, like it was doing some, I don't know, I think few people are willing to do, to really, like, oh, we can be in this one side and then feel a certain way, but then can we go and explore this other, what the nervous systems are holding in the white body group.
mhm.
Like, I think it just took a lot of courage
Mm.
to do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, like, it's another like, are you going to love people enough decision, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Because there's a lot of people like me who are mixed, there are a
mm-hmm,
lot of mixed
mm-hmm.
people like
Yeah.
me. I'm like mixed 10 generations down, like I'm like the white people from Spain just found the lightest pigmented indigenous people and just kept marrying them over and over again until they became me for 500 years later, so it's it's a little bit of whiteness is so specific in
Mm-hmm,
my
mm-hmm,
historical
mm-hmm,
the history of my genetics, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so I think it's also like there's this dude, it's like social researcher. His name, he passed away. His name's Noel Ignatieff, but he
mm-hmm,
has this idea that like understanding and then like violating, like basically committing treason against
mm-hmm,
whiteness,
mm-hmm,
is basically committing to love for all of humanity. And so like that's something I read a long time ago and was like, yes,
mm-hmm.
with my sort of, you know, like fervor, my internal justice fervor, but it
Yeah.
feels really different now because
Mm-hmm,
I think because the numbness is so clear in on white bodies, and it's so easy when you're mixed to like try to separate, like fly away from that white part. Like I don't want to see it. I know it's wrong. Like be ashamed of it, feel guilt, all of
mm-hmm,
these sort of things. Whiteness is worth understanding, to separate yourself from. Because I see expressions of whiteness in all kinds of people. It's just that some people have the privilege of not having violence perpetrated on them,
mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm.
or like privilege, also the luck to genetic luck of not get not that have not that not happening to them.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's like something is like, well, okay, like there's points at which like that feeling in your body is so big, not in my body,
Mm-hmm,
I mean, or in white
mm-hmm,
bodies, it's so
mm-hmm,
big. It feels like treason. If you're in front of a police officer and you tell them you don't agree, I have like a couple of specific examples in mind. Like,
mm-hmm,
I can lean into my privilege, override with numbness, and just say whatever I want,
mm-hmm,
but at the same time, retroactively, and also like in all the impacts in the world, it
mm-hmm,
lands like treason. Like you
mm-hmm,
violated the system, you
mm-hmm,
lose your sort of white card, in these moments. The one that says that you get a free pass. You get to commit acts of violence, destroy like the Capitol or shoot people in the street, stuff like that.
mm-hmm,
And but that's what whiteness is all that kind of violence. So
mm-hmm.
why would you want to be a card carrying member anyway? Right. Um, yeah. I know when I left the body culture group, that was most of the responses I got. No, don't leave.
I know.
But yeah, but it's like, there's certain like coming into reality, if you present as white,
Mhm.
or white bodied, you're coming into
Mhm.
reality with how the world like sees you.
Mhm.
And it's like, fine, you can get to know my textures and et cetera, right? But there's still that moment where a white body person walks into an all non-white space and
Mhm.
it tenses up. Like that's still gonna be a thing.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
understanding what that's about,
Mhm.
or processing, I guess, feeling what it's about. So like
Mhm.
in that numbness I had, because whiteness is all this numbness, right? But down in there, there's so much to see. If you're white bodied, you're really, it's like almost unfair to you not to look at whiteness in all of its contours, and as like a daily practice almost,
Mhm.
not almost,
Mhm.
but as a daily practice, and just be like,
Yeah.
wow, like this part is whatever, that's that connecting. This part makes me angry, this part makes me
Yeah.
sad, this part is disgusting, I can't do
Yes.
this actually part, like, it's cool if it didn't have this. I'll give you a funny example. I don't know why I'm going off, but like I think like classical music is cool. I love classical
Mhm.
music. I think white people did
Mhm.
a great job with that, except that it has
Mhm.
this like the hierarchy, the power, the structure, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
the cut. You're at your pinnacle classical genius. I'm like, can we just stop that part and just like the classical music? Does that make any sense? It's
Yeah.
like it's not like microcultures or tribes, like in
Yeah.
this case, let's say Austrian people or whatever,
Yeah.
or Italian opera. Like it's not like those small cultural things aren't good.
Yeah.
It's when they are brought into whiteness, and
Mhm.
suddenly they have that hierarchical domination element. You know,
Mhm.
Resma says, I remember that like white people don't have any culture.
Mhm.
And I think it's true. I think at the center of it is numbness. I think until it's like really what is down in that numbness that allows white people to tap out when they see a black body person get shot
Yeah.
by police, or not
Mhm.
feel impacted when they hear about child survivors of sex trafficking, like not
Mhm.
care when they heard like the atomic bomb landed in Japan. Like what
Mhm.
allows white bodies to feel numb that way? It's like,
Mhm.
like that's until that's felt out, there can't be any culture.
Mhm.
That is the culture. The culture is numbness, and so it doesn't really know itself yet.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
just too smothered. Is actually that's
Yeah.
the visual I have. You're just like smothered by the intensity
Mhm.
of this thing we call whiteness. Yeah,
Mhm.
and it's sad. Smothering kills culture in this case, white culture. So, and it has maybe killed it. Let's just start over again. It's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, okay.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Okay. I know.
It's
Okay.
okay, you know, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as you're sharing, it's like there's something just so sad about it. Like if you're numb,
Mhm.
what are you missing out on in life if a
Mm,
big part of you is just numb? Yes, that is protective. I do understand where that comes from, and the protective quality that any of us can have to be a bit numb to things. But when you don't feel like you're not feeling certain pain or certain, that intensity, that charge, but then what about like the good experiences too? It's like how
mhm,
much are we preventing ourselves from really experiencing joy and happiness and,
mhm,
ecstasy and like these really enlivening kind of experiences too. It's like,
mhm. Yeah, that's why I love the work you do, actually, because it's like the realms of something like sensuality are like really limited, to like capitalist stuff,
mm-hmm,
like uh, like here is the block where you're allowed to feel this, and this is the one where you go to work, and that's the one where you know what, like your time is split up into things that are, you're not allowed to bring sensuality into every aspect, for example, right?
mm-hmm,
It's like it's
mm-hmm.
quite limited
Yeah.
by time and work expectations and etc. And I get for some people it's like you're just surviving. So I'll
Mm-hmm,
always forgive that. Like we
mm-hmm,
just
mm-hmm,
can't make it work right now.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it's like it really smothers the imagination too, right? And that's what you're saying, like, just imagine, or maybe that's not what you're saying, but that's how I'm hearing it. Like that's how it lands
Mhm.
on my body. It's
Yeah.
like I can't imagine, like a life where we're like safe and laughing all day. It's like
Mhm,
so
mhm.
simple sounding, but it isn't, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very rare, like a day like that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm. You know, you and I have talked at length at different times, but I do think that part of this turn that came for me, which started with like the sensuality, which is really important to me still, is sensuality, sexuality, like opening to that, allowing the body to have that opening. That like eventually brought me into the somatic abolitionism work and, other like aspects of liberation where
Mhm,
just become so much more aware that to experience that does require really opening to everything, like
mhm,
the pain is part of it, like,
mhm,
but actually feeling it. And I'm not saying any that's easier, it just happens, and no, but just being more open to that, because there is, and you were mentioning, which I do think it's significant in the white body group, but to a certain extent, and so many of us have that numbness, because we
mhm,
can't feel it, all of this.
mhm,
It's
mhm,
protective, it allows us to function and, kind of move through life. But then can we create some, maybe it is with a therapist or practitioner or some other practice, like where we create a bit of safety and boundaries to allow that, the
mhm.
experience of whatever's there, which can then allow us to experience a full range, a much more fuller range.
Yeah. Well, that numbness, that totally makes sense. That numbness is like I thought about it the moment you said that. Even though it sounded very personal, it also sounded social. Like at the same time, like we
Mhm,
create a
mhm,
space and we want it to be safe, but because we're not, we can't recognize maybe who is unsafe in that space, right? Until they do that act of whiteness, or
yeah.
they show up as, they say that thing, right, or do
Mhm,
that thing that like
mhm,
violates the trust in that space. And it's like, oh, we should have known. It's easy to be like, oh, I should have known, or why did I let that happen? Everyone in the group is upset like that, right?
mhm,
But it was
mhm.
really that's like, okay, well, we were numb. We were too numb to this thing, and it needed to be brought to awareness.
Yeah.
And then I actually kind of like emergent circles, like emergent communities, like that's where it's
Mm.
like, okay, well, this person can then go heal somewhere else. Like you just trust
Mhm,
that healing is everywhere in the world.
mhm,
So your healing, gets to still be what it is. And this person can go,
mhm,
and there's no hard feelings in that way. Yeah, there's like, I learned something and maybe felt burned,
mhm.
but they're on those are just delineators, right? Like this person is
Yeah,
now on their own healing path,
yeah.
and you can still do the good you wanted to do in the safe way you want
Mhm,
to do it, right?
mhm, mhm.
Maybe that's like where, like, again, it's not about white, like this is a shorthand. I walk in a room with a white male body, it's a
Yeah,
shorthand. Oh, that person might not be safe,
right,
right?
right,
But it's whiteness, right? Like it's
right.
shorthand for people who are totally seeped in whiteness, which
Yeah,
is just colonial violence and oppression,
yeah.
right? Aligned with power. And so,
Mhm,
like, some
mhm,
of us, I don't know, everyone has some degree of it,
mhm,
because
mhm,
aligning with it keeps people safe. You know, you don't want to be crushed by power.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
Yeah, it's sad, like you mentioned, right? I feel I personally feel this is like outside looking in, and actually also with my family, especially the ones who have like darker pigment.
Yeah,
It's really quick to be like, I did this thing that was quite white, you know, and I hate myself for it. It's like turning inward and
yes.
like, why did I do that? Ugh, like why did I do
Yeah.
this thing? Like there's a certain like never forgive myself sort of
Mhm,
feeling about it.
mhm,
I mean, that's how I've seen it.
mhm,
Um, but I like maybe kind of part of the message here is like you hadn't yet tapped into that disgust to see that it wasn't right for your soul, right?
mhm,
And so like here's where you get compassion. It's like, oh shit, I didn't
mhm.
realize, pardon my French, but like oh shit, I didn't realize that somewhere along my genetic history, like
Yeah.
this whiteness like this whiteness expression showed up, and then I became
Yeah.
known, you know,
Yeah.
and now here it is, and
Mm-hmm.
I did it, or
Mm-hmm.
I allowed it in this space, or I,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was an expression of whiteness in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of being like, I'm the worst person ever and catastrophizing, just thinking like, again,
Right.
it's not like it's not holistic, it's not holistic. Like you're still good, and have
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
like sort of
Yeah.
values and strengths and good things, right, to lean into. And that was just whiteness.
Yeah.
It's like it's a little bit of like a delusional thought, or a delusional
Yeah.
world, right?
Yeah. 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 Like not all of
To
you. It's just,
No, by no means all
yeah.
of you. Like
By no means.
very little of
Mm-hmm.
you actually. And
True.
since all these responses are adaptive, it was only meant to
Mm-hmm.
protect you anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how that lands in your experience. We've talked about this and sort of all of these different contours, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, just getting used to just preparing for this video, right? Like there's okay, I have to do it right, or it has to be. I talked to you for hours and hours without any issue, but like this time, what are we going to talk about?
What
Because
are
we're
we
going to be
gonna
on,
talk about?
recorded, and and it's like those are just
I know.
worries from whiteness, that
Yeah.
there's some performance happening, or
Right.
that's my feeling anyway.
Yeah.
I appreciate how comfortable you are in this, you know. Um,
Well, I
tell
get
me.
nervous too. I mean, like
Yeah.
before any of these, I'm like, I don't know, but I'm getting it's helped me to just trust that,
Mhm.
the conversation will go how it is, because I wanted it that way, to not be like, oh, here are the questions, you can prepare and we can perform together. It was like, no, but that's not what this is.
Mhm.
And so it may not be,
Yeah.
obviously it wasn't for like everyone, not everyone was interested in it, but I'm really
Mhm.
grateful for you and others who were like,
Mhm.
okay, I'll do it.
Oh
you
yeah.
know
Can I ask a question actually for you,
yeah,
like sort of with that in mind? It's like
yeah, yeah.
after doing so many of these at this point, like what does burn the box mean to you? Or almost ask the same question, because like maybe it
Mm-hmm.
meant something when you were conceptualizing. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
if it means something different in the here and now. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just kind of curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did have, like I wrote some things when I was inviting people to do it, and it did have this like very, oppression, like, burning boxes of, like white supremacy and
Mhm.
patriarchy and colonialism and capitalism, like we're burning boxes, which I do think we all are. But
Mhm.
it's really interesting because when I consider it and when I've asked people about, like, people, these are all from the body of culture group, of the somatic abolitionism space that we were in, it can be very like something very personal and just something that's,
Mhm.
oh, I had this experience, or this is going on with my family, and it just, it's made it very kind of that the awareness of the personal nature of it. Like, yes, there's all this
Mhm.
historical burn boxes,
Mhm.
liberation, and there's systemic, aspects, but
Mhm.
it can be a burning the boss can be something very, very meaningful, but very like a personal thing, like, oh, I got this experience. Or, for me, I feel like I do appreciate all the bigger, like systemic aspects of burning boxes and, expanding our expression, like these kind of things. And I've also gotten to see what's happened in my own life of
Mhm.
like setting boundaries. Huge for me, setting boundaries. This was not
Mhm.
something I was ever very skilled at, because the appease required no boundary. It was like, oh,
Mhm.
it's about the other person's experience. So it was like, it didn't,
Not yours anymore. Yeah.
yeah, it didn't really allow for like oh, this is mine, this is theirs. And, it was
Mhm.
automatically like, what do they need? What does this person need? And I was just so, I say kind of humorously, but I was so skilled at that, so skilled at like
Mhm.
this appease way, that now it's like And this sensuality work, this embodiment kind of work, somatic abolitionism, all of it to get clear on what do I want? What do I really want? What do I really desire? How do I want to feel? Who am I allowing into that, my energetic space, whether that's a physical space or, connection? Like, I feel like all of that has gotten so much more clarity, and then also that using my voice more, and that is, like, I guess one way in my own little world of like burning boxes, so to speak, of burning conditioning away, that allows me to feel more free and more safe and more have more agency, I think, in my life.
I love that. Like the conditioning is the box, it's so rigid.
Yes.
I don't even know what's inside the box, to be honest. It's like, it's not just social construction, but it's like, I'm just, I don't know, we've spoken, but it's like, I feel in my own life, I was sort of designed to be the kind of person who would do a thing, take care of work for my parents, or co-parent, deal with trauma a certain way, like, internalize it, process it, just work with it. And so when I don't have any of that anymore, I don't really know what's left or what's inside. I mean, it's at the core, like, you're a good person, so it'll, no matter what happens, like, it'll be good once all of that stuff is burned away. But maybe it feels a little like equanimity. I don't know. Where it's like, well, there's really not much to prove. What do I feel like doing? As long as it doesn't hurt anyone. In your case, it brings a lot of good. Like, it's weird, not weird. It's like maybe correct, right? That, like, as you're working on yourself, Sonali, like, the things you're doing to heal yourself are actually healing other people. It's like those are two totally related and directly corresponding points, right? It's not like you're retreating from the world, like you're healing out loud. And people like me, for example, like, I gained a lot from your healing. Maybe that's what it means to do it in community, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I've gained a lot from yours. Like, that was a whole part of it, of being in that, like, a very trusted space that we built, with Somia, to allow ourselves to be witnessed. Like, it's a huge thing, and to witness each other and to go through the things, what would that we maybe had no control over or little control over, but be able to share and process together.
Yeah. Yeah.
You always amaze me at all of the hats that you wear. Like, sometimes I forget, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this animation or doing architecture or just so many different things.
Like, so much of that is coping, though, like,
Yeah.
if you had an option all day to sit with people in healing spaces, I mean, that's what I'd do. I know, and this other stuff is like the stuff I did in the world to make it survivable, and some of it I'm not, like, in retrospect, super aligned with value-wise. Like, for example, like, I have a family architecture firm, which it sounds like an inheritance, and it wasn't. It was more like my dad had a ton of debt from having it embezzled by a partner, and so we started an architecture firm when I was young, with just like severe negative dollars, and like, just the clients you have to take on, like, might be really great people, but the systems they have pulled are quite are like really misaligned. But like, I tend to, in my own body, I feel like there's kind of like a dialectic, like a seesaw, and on one side, it's just like, coping with, like, the intensity of being alive in this system. And so, like, you can't think about liberation when you can't pay
Mm,
bills and you're going to be homeless, and that's just really
mhm.
hard. So you're doing whatever you can. Um, but like when that feels safe,
Yeah.
and then it's like, yeah, you need the other side of that, where it's like, okay, we want a better world, we want to be safe, we want, and I feel like it's when things are good, it's like cool to slide in this direction. But I also know that a lot of
Mhm.
my friends who are in like radical community have a really hard
Yeah.
time paying bills, or just figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
And then feel horrible when they have to slide in the direction of, all right, well, I have to take a job, and being exploited, or
Yeah.
I'm working for an entity that I'm not like value aligned with. And
Mhm.
so, but both kind of have to coexist sometimes, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like I have a lot of friends who are military, for example, or
Mhm.
ex-military, and it's like they didn't want to be destroyed, in order
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
find life survivable, but they know they get that
Mhm.
check and it makes them feel safe. And
Mhm.
given like the historical trauma, right? It's like maybe lots of generations didn't feel safe. And so they join the
Mhm.
military, they get their paycheck on the 1st and the 15th, right? And that's what they do to like cope. And then once that's stable, yeah, okay, there it's a lot easier to lean into like the liberation
Mhm.
side. Um,
Mhm.
and so when people in like radical communities suddenly vanished on me, and I find out they're working a job or something now, I'm like not that like like not disappointed or not anything. It's like this place is really hard to live in, and so but I mean completely like aligning with that without the liberation part is like, well, fine, I'll just exploit people and I'll just get
Yeah.
what's mine, and this is the right way to live. It's like, ugh,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
that's where
That's just like
that
that.
whiteness is.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
You want to do
like,
that? Okay.
yeah. It's like those like coaches where it's like, I'm going to help people who need the support, and I'm going to charge them $20,000 a year. And you're like, are you really helping people grow? I mean, like with no tiered system,
Yes.
let's just like let's just take advantage of people. Um, and like that, and that's right. We all should be doing that. That's what that's what this is about. It's like it's not like you're growing people, you're growing with people too, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like your growth is so valuable, like yours actually, Sonali, I mean you, not
Oh.
like, and also to listeners, but yours specifically, your growth is so valuable, you know. You could value it anywhere you want. If you want it to be $100,000 an hour, if you want it to be $1 an hour, it's
Mhm.
really like infinite value. It's like almost outside of capitalism. It's way outside. It's more about like where you put your energy. I mean, I feel very honored to see you every week and in off hours and chatting. It's like because
Mm.
you think I'm cool enough to put some of that value
Mm.
into time wise. So I mean, even if
Oh.
you don't think I'm that cool, you know that like there's some energy exchange happening. There's some energy exchange happening. You know?
Mhm.
So that's meaningful. You know.
I appreciate that. I had to sit with that. It's not easy to like receive this. I'm, as you know, in this space of figuring out a lot of these things of there's that we're living in it, capitalism and the
Mhm.
way things are, but then, you know, wanting to do different kind of work, support like bodies of culture and,
Mhm.
how it all works.
Mhm.
It's, yeah,
I mean, I don't know what
something
like
to
money
deal with.
means. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what money means, and I think about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like two things always jump out when I think about money, especially when
Yeah.
people talk about it in therapy. But one is
Yeah.
like in the last 50 years, like 60% of the global wealth is in like a few people's hands, right? So if that weren't the case, how much money would we be getting paid? Actually, I don't think we can
Mm-hmm.
understand. Yeah, like it doesn't mean, oh, you make
Mm-hmm.
double your pay. It doesn't actually mean that. It
Right.
means you could be getting paid anything. We don't actually know the value of any job. It's kind of
Yeah.
incredibly made up, you know? And
Yes.
so that's always weird to me, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing I think about is this idea that like you can't just get like a loaf of bread or a bottle of water. Like you already need to, like you're born and you just already need to earn, in order to
Yes.
get something that is a basic need. Like,
Yes.
that's insane. It's like money is debt. It's exactly the same thing. And that's like kind of
Yes.
sick. It's sort of like, what is it, Christo-fascism, like Christian fascism. You have to align with the idea that you're in a spiritual debt before you can
Yes.
get even one need met, you
Yeah.
know? And that's kind of just insane to me. It's just insane.
Yes.
I don't
It
know.
is.
So like, so like money kind of, I don't know, in my body it makes like zero sense.
Mm-hmm.
I know,
Mm-hmm.
I hate it for that reason. But all that said, like, like that's how like personal value and money, like cost of a person's services, like have
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with each other.
Right.
And that's a weird thought, I think, when you're told that these two things are related, you know.
Yeah.
Mm,
When that's just the conditioning. I mean, that's just the reality in some ways.
yeah. Hmm.
But
Like you should be really good at this, and that will mean that you're deserving more money. It's like,
that's right.
how many people can we think of that are not super great at their job but demand a lot of money,
Yeah, exactly.
or are super great and undercut themselves, like
Mm-hmm.
money.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about like the money part. It's about the them, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean
Mm-hmm.
like it's a self-esteem thing. I just mean like it's more about you growing as a person, and money is like a decision we can make, about what we're worth in what circumstances. Like I
Mm-hmm.
sometimes think in therapy, and we've spoken about this before too, right? It's like it's totally an energy exchange. So if I'm getting like a really clear exchange, wow, that's really in my favor. I don't really need to charge as much or want to, you know. But when it
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
effort, a lot of effort, and I'd see a lot of couples
Mm-hmm.
and families, when it takes a lot of effort,
Yes.
I need to charge more. And it's just like
Yeah.
there's skin in the game in mine, you know,
Yeah.
like it's sort of like
Absolutely.
a commitment decision.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
but I mean, in the best possible world, we're all gaining,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have to worry about resources,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Here's a whole
Mm.
separate conversation. We're
So
sort of
much. I mean, we know we can talk for hours.
I know we've covered like a huge,
Um,
long, wide gamut of things here.
um, I do want you to be able to share like where people can find your work and
For
and
sure.
and things. But before that, I just wonder if there's anything like hasn't been said or like related to
Mhm.
burning boxes or what we've talked about, anything that would make it feel complete. I
Mhm.
just
Yeah,
wanted to
no, I
leave
can think
that.
of one thing right away, and
Okay.
it's more for people who are listening, right? Like this is like I've known you for a pretty long time, and in a really intimate setting where we're
Mhm,
just meeting constantly and working and
mhm,
not doing the work, quote unquote, because it's not hard work in like a
mhm.
capitalist way,
Right.
but like we're growing ourselves
Yeah.
together, right? And so I don't know if people listening can conceptualize first, like what you're like the it's a combination of like intensity, integrity, intention, and like warm ferocity that your whole journey has been to this
Mm,
point. And
mm.
and now,
Yeah.
like, alongside all that stuff, here's where we are in this Burn the Box podcast. It's not like you just showed up and we're like, let's do this podcast. It's
Mhm,
like the culmination, uh, but also the step in the wisdom
mhm,
direction. Right, this is where like on the path, wisdom means doing
mhm,
this. And
mhm,
so everything to this point has led to, sort of the intensely wise person, sort of vast insights you're bringing here. So I think I'd
mhm,
like for people to know that. But on the other, it's like everything going forward is also going to, for people who've been following you or want to, is going to be like a length of journey for their own growth, because you're always growing. They'll grow alongside you if they keep listening
mhm.
and stay tuned to
Mm.
Sonali's everything she does. So
Oh.
it's totally worth like listening to everything Sonali says or tuning into all of her programs and buying all her things, because
Thank
you'll
you.
never stop growing. Yeah, you'll never stop growing alongside Sonali. And
Oh
so,
my
yeah,
God.
so that's been my
Thank
experience.
you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
It's so
that feels
obvious
so
to me.
tender.
I could be like, oh, it's so heartfelt or whatever, but it just seems so obvious. It's like, yeah, everybody, listen, tune in. Just do it. It's easy. Easy
Appreciate that.
decision. Yeah,
Oh, thank you, Tony. Thank you so much.
sure.
Um,
People can find
and
me one of two
yes.
places. Yeah,
Okay.
they can go to tonychavira.com. It's
Mhm,
TonyChav as in Victor,
mhm,
IRA. Yeah,
mhm,
so TonyChavira
mhm,
.com. And I just have
mhm.
like the stuff that's on there is general information about me, but I have like an abolition sort of thing on there. It's kind of a primer,
Mhm.
but what I'm proud of on that site is a list of books and films and things. And I think it's one of these like if you want to get a like an idea of intersectionality primarily and how it's related to abolition. Um,
Yeah.
and then really connecting to the heart space of that. It's like fiction
Mhm,
and nonfiction books, and then funny films. Some are like horror,
mhm,
some are animation. It's all over the
mhm.
board. So
Oh,
you know, it's some of it is like emotional growth, and anyway, I think providing people like cool resources helps
yeah,
expand us in all these
absolutely.
different ways. So anyway, and then the other
Absolutely.
place is on Instagram at Minefield
Yes.
Wonderland. I'm kind of putting together a book. It'll take time. It'll have the same title, and it means
I love
something.
that.
Minefield Wonderland. We can talk about it some other time. But there, it's more about getting a manner, an idea of what my manner is, and a lot
Mhm,
of these sort of thoughts that are a combination of like intentional healing,
mhm,
sociology research, which I think is not often
mhm.
integrated into the healing process. I
Yeah.
think a lot of our healing is made to sound very personal, and that's quite capitalist and colonial.
Mhm.
When you look at sociological research, you see like, oh, these are pretty common human experiences for one, but also these some of these things damage us, some of these ways of
Yeah.
operating, and then we personalize them in really unfair
Mhm,
ways for
mhm.
us, and so we don't necessarily have to do that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, I kind of lean in that direction.
Mhm.
You'll see a lot of my stuff now about grief because I've recently lost my father and my grandmother. So, like, that's kind of integrated into the journey of it a
Mhm.
bit, but
Mhm.
not but that's a feature of it now.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's so those two places, tonychavira.com and on Instagram at Minefield Wonderland.
Well, thank you, Tony. I didn't know
Yeah,
you were
thanks,
writing a
Sonali. I very
book,
appreciate it.
but I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's a slow kind of thing.
Mhm.
It's going to be about emotions,
Mhm.
like but very particular ones, like disgust
Mhm.
being one,
Mhm.
jealousy being another,
Mhm.
envy being another. There's like delineations for ones.
Mhm.
Shame versus toxic shame. Yeah, there's just some we know well, but others that
Yeah.
are a little less approached.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful.
some social things about anger and sadness, maybe not personal
Mhm.
ones, but ways in which we like socially adopt um,
Mhm.
these emotions as like useful or not useful
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
patriarchal system. So there's anyway more later, but
Yeah.
it's going to be that.
Amazing. Well, I'm so grateful for you and this kind of like journey we've been on for a long time and to have this conversation. It's really
Yeah,
beautiful.
me too. I'm so glad you're doing this. Yeah, just at all. So exciting to see where it goes. So I'll be listening going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the Burn the Box movement.